Couple minutes past the hour, third and final hour on the radio of Miller and Moulton on this Wednesday. The bonus Twitch hour is coming up in an hour. Seth Everett to join us coming up in a little more than 25 minutes. It is a pleasure to catch back up with Bud Elliott, he of the Nolecast, he of 24/7 Sports. And if you can see us on twitch.tv, Bud is a walking NASCAR driver with the Nolecast shirt and the 24/7 hat.
It's a great shirt, though, Bud. This makes me want Miller and Moulton merchandise because the Nolecast shirt is fantastic.
It's dry fit too. So I mean, this is yeah. In this kind of climate, you got to have it. Although today, finally felt some of that football weather. I mean, here in Orlando, is it nice down there in Fort Myers? Are we getting like 60s in the morning?
No, we're not. No, as a matter of fact, and I actually watched the weather to really bore people, but basically it looks like that cold front is sitting right about where you are. I was hoping this morning, I take that dog out for the walk at about 5 a.m, and I'm waiting to open the door and have a cool bit of air hit me in the face as opposed to a blanket of humidity. So we're not there yet. You know the difference between Orlando and Fort Myers.
I do. There is a difference.
This time of year, it is there. All right, Bud, you kind of called the Noles game. You said they weren't ready. I don't know how surprised you were by the outcome, but after the fourth down, horrible trick play call, it looked to me like they quit after that call. If there was one thing I took from it, it wasn't the beating, but after that play, Florida State did not look interested for the rest of the game.
I agree. To me, it looked like they were just playing out the string. I appreciate you giving me credit for calling it. I think on offense, I did nail it, right? Like they couldn't block at all, and we knew that going in, and you can only double one guy, and the other three guys were going to get smoked, and that's largely what happened. Blackman didn't play well. The receivers, Terry's knee was dinged up, and that's how you score, 10 points in a game. But I do think defensively, the staff deserves some criticism, right? That they went in with a game plan that was fairly newish, and granted, everything is kind of new if you're a new defensive coaching staff that didn't get a spring and summer, but they really failed to execute that game plan at all. And at the same time, I think Miami and Derek King deserve credit. We talked on this show last week about how Miami was largely surviving on their explosive plays being incredibly explosive, which is not necessarily sustainable. And they needed to be better as far as down-to-down consistency and success rate. And in this game, they really did that. They executed much more consistently on a down-to-down basis. And I actually moved Miami up in my ACC power ratings this year. This week, in fact, on 247sports.com, from fourth in the ACC to third. I jumped him over North Carolina, and honestly, I thought about putting him above Notre Dame. I just want to see a little bit more from their offensive line. But I'm really looking forward to next weekend when they go play at Clemson, and FSU is just a long way away. I mean, this is clearly a year zero situation for a new coach, and they're going to need some time.
All right, I tried to point out to Noles fan that in 1997, not that far removed from the Canes glory days. The Canes won the title in 91, were undefeated, lost the championship game in 92. 5 years later, the Canes get shellacked by the Noles 47-0. And it was during a run where the Noles beat them 5 times in a row, which was unheard of in the rivalry during the 80s and the 90s. 3 years later, the Canes come back and beat the Noles and should have played for the national title. And 4 years later have historically maybe the best college football team of all time. So I tried to point out to Noles fans that, hey, the Canes were able to get up off the deck and within 3 years. Now, it was 3 long years, all right, and you got to do a lot of things right. But they went from 47-0 losing to arguably being the best team in the country, and they didn't get a chance to play for the national title. But isn't that what we're talking about here with Florida State? I mean, this is 3 to 4 years.
There's no doubt. And when you have 3 coaches in a 4-year period, I think, especially given the transfer portal and all the attrition that can occur nowadays, if you go 3 coaches in a 4-year period, you're committing to a legitimate rebuild, right? Like that. And we've said that for a while on the Nolecast. Now, I did not think they'd lose by 32 to Miami, but certainly we told you guys we had no chance to win that game, to pick them to win it. They do have some young pieces they like on this team. we did see them, get a lot of young guys in the game after, as you all pointed out, some of these veterans didn't really seem to really have their head in the game anymore. I think we will see them commit to a little bit more of a youth movement down the stretch. Now, not like, hey, all you seniors are benched for the rest of the year, because then if they quit or they decide to opt out, and then you have a couple guys get COVID, and you have to start canceling games because your roster numbers are decreased. But I do think you'll see more young guys get to play throughout the rest of this year. Use this year as sort of figuring out what you have on the roster, almost like an extended spring, because they didn't get a spring, to figure out, sort of what they had and what they needed to bring in. And then we'll see where they go from there. If you're in the state of Florida, you always have the ability to flip the roster. There are no, Tom Brady lasts for a decade in New England, or if you're in the AFC West right now, you got to be thinking, oh, we got to deal with Mahomes unless he gets hurt for like the next 10 years. That doesn't exist in college, because the best players only stay for 3 years, right? I mean, the good ones stay for 4. So it is very flippable. It's just not going to happen this year, and I don't think it's going to happen next year. I think 3 years is realistic.
All right. On that note, though, even with that being said, that you flip it every year, we've watched what Alabama has created, where they can lose 7 starters on each side of the ball, and we think they're the same damn team. Kirby Smart's getting eerily close to doing similar things. Yeah, they didn't look good in the first half, but all of a sudden, took them a half to figure it out. And it wasn't like they were playing our lady. I know it's a bad SEC team, but there's still men on the field that they're dominating by the second half. Can it get to the point with Florida State where they are just not attractive to kids? Because, yeah, there's so many in Florida, but are they out recruiting anybody in Florida right now? Are they out recruiting UCF? Because they are digging themselves in a hole that I wonder, is there a point when you just can't get out of that hole, bud?
So it's a really good point. I think this staff probably thought they would be 2 or 3 wins better this year than they actually were. I think they misjudged how good the offense and defense were in practice, much like the last staff did, by the way, when they came. I think they had to think, okay, if the defense is crushing the offense this badly in practice, we must have a pretty damn good defense. We're hearing a lot of these guys are NFL dudes. And so I think they have a lesser product to sell now than they anticipated that they would have. Playing time does sell, and proximity does sell, especially during this COVID time. But they're in a very tough spot. Like, they didn't get to have your junior days you normally have, and they didn't get to have visitors come for their spring game and to come up visit for spring practice. We've been in a dead period since March, and this coaching staff has not been able to get out and meet the high school coaches because their NCAA restrictions. You can't travel, right? Coaches have not been able to come and meet them. There's a good portion of their recruiting class they have never met in person, right? It's been entirely over Zoom. And granted, everybody else is operating under the same parameters, but at least they've met these kids and these high school coaches in prior years at their trips to these schools. So they're in a really tough spot here. Luckily for Norvell, FSU did not really have the money to fire Willie Taggart, but they did it anyway. Norvell and Taggart have the same agent, so I'm pretty sure that he understands this should be a long-term build there, because they don't have the jack to get rid of him and make him put the screws to him and say, hey, make this a short-term build. I think the key for them will be showing improvement next year and saying, hey, look, we had a lot of cultural issues here. We had to get ironed out. We had some real roster imbalance. Some positions are just absolutely terrible. Can we show some improvement next year? I think the offensive line will be better next year, actually. They do think they've hit on some of the young guys they brought in as far as the promise they've shown in just a couple of weeks. I think quarterback will probably be better next year, and we'll have to see about the rest of the roster. But, yeah, no, to your point, they're in a very difficult situation right now recruiting-wise, largely because they've had to form all these relationships over Zoom.
He's Bud Elliott of 24/7 Sports and co-host of the Nolecast. You can follow Bud on Twitter at BudElliott3. BudElliott3. Is the Big 12 out of the playoff? It's not me trying to be flippant. It's not trying to, sports talk radio guy I'm dead serious after what happened against the Sun Belt and what happened last weekend. Is the Big 12 out of the playoff? Does UCF and or Cincinnati have a better shot at the playoff right now than the Big 12 champion?
They're not out of the playoff, to answer your first question.
Wow.
No, they're not. Now, I think if you project and you say, okay, the Big 12 champion is most likely going to have 2 losses, then I think they're out. I don't think a 2-loss Big 12 champion gets in if we assume ACC champ is a 0 or 1 loss, if we assume Big 10 champ is 0 or 1.
How about 1 loss? How about a 1-loss Big 12 champion?
So
you think they get in?
It depends. Does that 1 loss have this logo right here? Are they Texas? Like, does Texas start to look good down the stretch? Do they have very charismatic and media darling quarterback Sam Ehlinger, right, playing for them? The committee does not really remember close wins and docking for them unless you have a ton of them. See also 2014 Florida State, where they won every single game by the skin of their teeth. If Texas has 1 loss, that probably means that they've beaten Oklahoma twice. They have a win over Okie State, over TCU, which looked very good in the comeback against Iowa State once they put Max Duggan in. I don't know if you looked at those numbers in the box score. Holy cow. They've beaten Iowa State. I think a 1-loss Texas will have an argument, but I don't think they're a lock. If Texas runs the table and wins the Big 12, then I think they're in for sure. With UCF, I think they have to smash Cincinnati. I think that they have to show that they are like Power 5 good in the eyes of the committee, and that means that they are way better than these other teams in the AAC.
Boy, oh boy. We're of the opinion that if we were Mike Oresco running the AAC, we'd be pounding the tables right now, talking about draft picks in the NFL, doing all of the things that we need.
He was on Firebomb yesterday. He was like, for 20 minutes, it was like an AAC infomercial.
It should be. It should be. Wow. Because they've got the numbers to back it up, Bud. I mean, they truly do. Draft picks, all of the things that they need, they're in a position to back that up. But let's get to a conference that, regardless of the Big 12 or the AAC, the SEC may just send 2 and end all of this for everybody. The Big 12 could more likely be out because Georgia and Florida both go with whoever wins the West. That being said, Auburn and Georgia, this is a game that, until I moved to the South, didn't realize the historical significance of this game. It is the oldest rivalry in the South.
Deep South.
These 2 coaches don't like one another. And man, oh man, is this great theater. Gus Malzahn says they're the most talented team in the league. And Kirby Smart simply says that's coach speak. He's going to say it next week with whoever he plays. Oh, by the way, Auburn's the most talented team in the league. I mean, this is the stuff that we need all of the time. This is why the Pirate coming to Mississippi State is wonderful. This is already set up. This is a huge game. And after the way, I thought Kentucky largely outplayed Auburn in that game. I thought there were some tremendous coaching mistakes done by Stoops and company. The fake punt, going for 2 when you're down 8, which was just stupid to me that early. That being said, Auburn got it going late. Georgia got it going late. How much do we know about these 2 teams right now, Bud?
There's a lot we don't know about these teams. By the way, it's the Deep South's oldest rivalry because UNC and Virginia is, quote, the South's oldest rivalry, and it's actually older. So they have to call it the Deep South. That's a good little trivia bit there. I loved Gus Malzahn's statement because it's, first of all, it puts all the pressure on Georgia, calling the most talented team in the country. It also digs Alabama, which certainly thinks that it's the most talented team in the country. There's literally no real negatives to making that statement other than maybe your booster saying, wait, why can't we be the most talented team in the country? Georgia has medically cleared JT Daniels. I don't know if he's going to start this week. I am not really sold on Stetson Bennett being the answer for Georgia at quarterback. DeJuan Mathis really struggled. The offensive line there struggled. And that is a red flag for me because I think Arkansas will have a competent offense this year under Kendall Briles. Like basically everywhere Briles goes, the offense improves. But I have zero reason to think Arkansas is a good defense, like none. And Georgia really struggled against them. So that is a red flag to me. I thought Auburn's Kevin Steele, who was an awesome defensive coordinator today, really nice job of effectively playing bend but don't break against Kentucky, seeing if Terry Wilson could throw the ball underneath accurately, and ultimately he couldn't do it consistently enough. Auburn gave up like 12 of 18 on 3rd downs, but when it got to be like 3rd and 7, 3rd and 8, they clamped down. I thought Bo Nix looked better, but I'm concerned about Auburn's run game. I think their backs had like 2.8 per carry, which is not great, obviously. And now they're going to go play a team in Georgia, which I do think has the best defense in the country by a lot. Like, I mean, I think not even Ohio State. I mean, I don't know. Pick your second best defense in the country. I still think it's a decent bit short of Georgia. That said, when Auburn came out at +8 on Sunday, I had to take that because I'm not taking Georgia to cover 2 scores on a quality defense.
All right. What'd you make of what Mississippi State did to LSU and the debut of Mike Leach as a head coach in the SEC and a Stanford quarterback who didn't throw that many times in a month at Stanford and didn't accumulate those kind of stats in half a season in the Pac-12? What did you make of what took place Saturday afternoon in Baton Rouge?
Okay, now granted, my in-laws are LSU fans, so I was at an LSU, watch party there, and that was awesome to watch. I mean, it was. I've seen KJ Costello since high school. I knew how talented he was. In the Buds Bets column, we played Mississippi State's team total over because it was 20. I was like, all right, feel good about that. And then in live betting, as soon as I saw LSU was going to try to go a little bit of tempo, I was like, all right, let's get on this bandwagon here. And over 54 live and a couple other lives that also hit. Look, I mean, KJ Costello can throw the ball. I was skeptical about Mississippi State's ability to get its receivers ready in that system, given the lack of spring and summer, and they did a great job. Like, I know they only run 3 or 4 plays, but they really executed them well. Bo Pelini has also faced Mike Leach several times. Remember,
yes.
Like Bo was at Nebraska. Mike Leach was the OC at Oklahoma for a while. Then he was Texas Tech's head coach. So he's faced him a bunch, actually.
Well, 3 times they had gone, twice as head coach, but he had faced Mike Leach 3 times, and he was 1-2. But believe it or not, in terms of points given up in yards, no, very like 15 first downs a game on average. A point total, I think he had given up on average of like 26, which against the Mike Leach team is fine. And you think if you're LSU, well, if we give up 24, 27, we're going to win.
LSU looked like a team that lost 20 of 22 starters off the best team in the history of college football. I mean, they just looked like a team that had not practiced together. And we know when Orgeron came out and said almost our entire team has had COVID. So we know they had some cancellations and stuff. The offense just looked out of sync. I mean, how many times did you watch? It wasn't like Mississippi State's defense played that well, right? There were guys open at times, and it was like, all right, Burrow throws that a half second ago, and that's completed in stride. It's I thought Brennan was turning touchdowns into first downs at times, and then there were times where Burrow clearly takes off, and Brennan just was late to do so. But I can't put it all on him. And you have their best 2 targets other than Marshall are a true freshman tight end and Eric Gilbert, who we at 24/7 Sports is the highest rated tight end we've ever had, and he's just that's going to be a name. If you guys are in any of those fantasy leagues that like where you pick college guys and you hold them for a long time, take him now. He's a stud. And then the other guy, Keyshawn Boutte, like you're dealing with some true freshmen there. You got true freshmen on defense. LSU just looks like a team that wasn't ready. I'm a little bit surprised that Orgeron hyped this team as much as he did in the offseason, though.
Interesting, because Mississippi State's a big number favorite against Arkansas this week. You heard Bud talk about what he thinks of the Arkansas defense. So 18 might be something worth getting after. Let's go to the East, though, because Bud, after watching Kentucky and Auburn, and Kentucky just kind of beat Kentucky again, I watched, at least partially while I was watching Miami destroy Florida State, this Tennessee-South Carolina game. And, Tennessee, there's a lot of talk, and maybe we'll see better by the time it's done. But watching that game, I thought there was still a canyon between Florida, Georgia, and everyone else in the East. And I'm watching Mississippi State, and even Ole Miss getting beat had offense, and you're going, well, the West has Mississippi and Mississippi State are better. Clearly, just watching them, they're better than they were a year ago. I watched South Carolina and Tennessee, and I know Tennessee might be better, but it wasn't like a Mississippi State better, if you know what I mean. Is that canyon still there, or can Tennessee improve enough that when they play Florida late and when they play Georgia, that they're going to have something for the 2 big boys in the East?
I don't think they're going to have something for those 2 games necessarily, unless Georgia's offense proves to be a train wreck, or unless Florida's defense is a bigger worry than I realize that it is, right? And Florida had a couple key guys out against Ole Miss, and that's a system that's going to score some points on everybody, especially with the tempo that they utilize. But look, I think Tennessee is probably going to be improved this year, but I just don't know if they're going to be improved that much. They also had a very difficult COVID fall, right? They had 44 guys miss practice, and they weren't able to scrimmage. I think they had to cancel both their scrimmages. So I give credit to Tennessee for going out and winning a game that they had to win if they want to reach some of their goals. Now, I don't think they can reach all their goals. I don't believe they're good enough to win the East. I just looked at my power numbers here. I'd have Florida Florida for me would give 11.5 to Tennessee on a neutral field. So, I mean, I know they go to Knoxville end of the year, it could be cold, but if that game was played today in Knoxville, I'd still have UF, by about 8 points because I'm not giving full home field advantage this year. Tennessee is fine. Like I think that they're fine. Good job for winning that game. Muschamp, classic defensive head coach. Let's kick a field goal down 7 with 3 minutes left. Probably not the best idea there. I didn't look up what the numbers say about that, but I have a pretty good intuition as to what they say about doing that. But I think the East is Florida and Georgia, or Georgia and Florida, depending. And both those teams looked great on one side of the ball on the opening weekend and had some kind of questions on the other side of the ball that, in Florida's case, I did not expect their defense to play that poorly. And in Georgia's case, I think we had real questions going into the game, and some of our fears were confirmed.
One thing to keep in mind for Tennessee right now, take the polls for what they're worth, but they play 3 of the top 5 teams in the country. I mean, they play Bama, Georgia, and Florida. I mean, so they could be a pretty good 7-3 team, if you know what I mean. Does Todd Grantham need to dial it back defensively? When your offense is that good, if you're Dan Mullen, do you say to Todd Grantham, listen, this team can compete for the national championship. We don't have to blitz this much. We've got a lot of good players. Let teams try to go 8-10 plays against us. We don't have to be as much feast or famine in 2020 as we've been.
I understand the sentiment, but I think if you hire Todd Grantham, you hire Todd Grantham, and you're doing it for what he wants to do. Like, I don't want to have Todd Grantham as my DC and ask him to play, a real conservative style. I don't know if they love, what their defensive line gives them. Although I was fairly impressed against Ole Miss, with some of the stuff they were doing. But with this offense this year, they look like they want to chuck the ball around a ton. If maybe Dan Mullen is cool playing game, like if you give Dan Mullen 90 plays on offense, which is probably what's going to happen if you blitz this much and play this aggressively, you're going to give up some home runs, but you're going to get the ball back to your offense pretty quickly. Maybe that's how they want to play. I mean, who cares if you win 24-10 or 50-35? I think 50-35 is a little bit higher variance, obviously, and that may not be what you want as a team of that caliber. But ultimately, like, Todd Grantham is a blitz pressure guy. Like, you know that when you hire him.
I understand. I just wonder if you coach just a little more conservatively. When you're on the come, you can coach one way, okay? But when you can win a national championship, and Florida can.
I think so too.
I just wonder if you just do it a little differently. That's all. But
maybe against a team like Tennessee, right? Because Ole Miss is going to score, and Ole Miss's defense is horrible. So maybe it's like, all right, let's get some turnovers, let's get some sacks, and we'll deal with the explosive plays, which is basically what they did, right? Florida gave up some explosive plays, but they also created some short fields via those turnovers, and they created some sacks, which created long down and distance, and they got the punts off them. Maybe against a Tennessee that is not an explosive offense, you say, hey, let's see if Garantano can actually complete some underneath throws, much like what Auburn did to Kentucky. Can he be consistent? I don't know. Tennessee's not like let's not give Tennessee explosive plays. Let's see if they can be consistent and grind it on us. I can see the argument.
We've talked about A&M of the one team that really took it on the chin with the scheduling. I mean, their schedule was lined up to be 6, 7, 8-0 before they got to the hard part of their schedule. Well, the SEC redid it, and oh, good luck. You've got Alabama on the road this week. It's 17 now. If they were playing and Texas A&M could build some momentum, don't you see this being more like a 10-point game in November? I mean, how big is the disadvantage for A&M of having to play this now?
So it is a big disadvantage, particularly because we know in Jimbo's system, it can be tough for young receivers to get ready. And this Texas A&M team has some real talent at receiver, but it's young. And we thought receiver was going to be a strength for them this year. But then what's his name got hurt and Osmond opted out. So then they really went down as far as experience returning. If this hits 17.5, I have to take a look at A&M, right? I mean, ultimately, I juiced this number purposefully to not bet A&M when it came out at like 14.5. I was like, all right, like get a number that you really feel comfortable with. So I gave Bama an extra point for the fact that Saban owns all of his former assistants. And I think really when you look at when Nick loses games, it's not the mobile quarterback theory. That's an immediate thing, but I don't think that's true. Go and look back. It's elite receivers who you end up seeing on Sunday who take advantage of all the one-on-one opportunities outside the hash marks that Bama as a defense presents. I mean, that's kind of what Nick's defense is predicated on. Our outside guys are going to win. We're going to play a lot of man coverage on the outside. So, even going back to South Carolina, Alshon Jeffrey, right, when they got him in 2012, Mike Evans when Johnny Manziel beat him. A lot of guys like that. A&M, I don't know if they have that right now, but I do trust Jimbo to play a super slow game. I mean, they are consistently one of the slowest offenses in the country, not named Army or Navy. And it's just hard to get blown out if you're playing an 8-possession game. And the defense for them is not bad. So I'm going to have to take them, I think, if this gets over 17, just out of principle.
He's Bud Elliott. Follow him on Twitter at Bud Elliott3. Bud Elliott3. He of 24/7 Sports and co-host of the Nolecast. Bud, appreciate the garb. Thanks so much for your time. Stay safe. Be well.
All right, guys. Be well. Take care.
Bud Elliott with his Nolecast shirt and with his 24/7 Sports hat, joining us here on Miller and Moulton. Seth Everett itching to go in the Twitch room. He is next. Miller and Moulton, Southwest Florida's Fox Sports.